This was going to be tricky. I didn't have much to go by, and I was running out of time. See, this was my last case before retirement, and I had made a promise. My name is John Zalen, and I was the lead investigator in the case of the pentatonic killer. The case started as something that looked like a typical accidental blues. We run into that a lot here. Basically, blues guy plays using the pentatonic scale and accidentally hits a note. We investigate, and turns out it's just the Dorian scale, but it was complete accident, case closed. But this was different. The guy clearly knew what he was doing. He had a hidden agenda, and I had to find out before it was too late. So I started reviewing the facts. On October 24th at 10:37 p.m., Richard Chardane takes the stage at the open jam night at the Scat Club. The house band starts playing a typical 1-4-5 blues chord progression in G. Richard starts by playing a few somewhat tasty blues licks. So far, nothing out of the ordinary. But at 10:38 and 37 seconds, Richard commits the unthinkable. Richard starts slipping out of the minor pentatonic scale, and this was no accident. The man knew exactly what he was doing. This was first-degree murder of the blues, and I was on the case. All I had to go by was the security recording of that evening. I started listening. I listened to this over and over. There was something really interesting about Richard's facial expression. Still gives you chills to this day. You could tell that the man had a plan. Now, when you have a case like this, you can't just go barging into the guy's house and arrest him. You need solid evidence, and that's why they called me. My first step was to interrogate the house band of the Scat Club. I needed to figure out exactly what chords were being played when Richard committed his crime. So just like I thought, we were dealing with a typical 1-4-5 in G. It's G7, C7, and D7. Now the recording also told me that Richard started playing with the approved minor pentatonic scale. This told me that Richard was not new to this. Now the next thing I did was to send the recording to the lab. See, I needed to know exactly what the guy was playing when he slipped out of the pentatonic scale. Now I got the results a few days after, and the report showed me exactly the notes that Richard had been playing during the offense. Now this was tricky at first, but I was able to map out exactly where these notes are found on the fretboard. What I came up with was very confusing. I was truly puzzled, but then it hit me. See, all the notes that I had on my diagram didn't all happen at once. Some notes were played over a certain chord, others on the other chord, and that's what I did. I organized all of these notes according to the chord they were played over. So now I had 3 sets of notes corresponding to each of the 3 chords the house band was playing. I was still very confused because none of these diagrams looked like a scale I had encountered in my career as a detective. Could this man, Richard, have discovered a new mysterious scale that no one had ever played before? I had to find out. So I called Luis Marquez.
I'm Luis Marquez. I'm the head of the Federal Bureau of Scale Investigation. When I received Inspector Zalen's files, I recognized immediately what we were dealing with was mixolydian. Now that scale's great over dominant 7th chords, so I wasn't surprised at all to see it being used there. What made this particular case unique was that rather than using mixolydian for the whole progression, this guy seemed to be using a different kind of mixolydian for each of the chords of the progression. In other words, he was using G mixolydian over the G7, C mixolydian over the C7, and D mixolydian over the D7 a true psychopath. Not only that, but it also seems he was blending in some of the notes from the G minor pentatonic scale. Cunning.
This was truly mind-blowing. This meant that this Richard was purposely changing scales each time he heard a new chord. This was way worse than I had ever anticipated. Richard was a psychopath. No, I'm not proud of this, but sometimes when you're dealing with such an extreme case, you gotta do what you gotta do. So I tried it for myself. I purposely broke the fourth fundamental rule of being a scale investigator. I stepped outside of the pentatonic scale. I put in a backing track, and for the very first time in my life, I did not use the minor pentatonic scale. At first it was really awkward. I couldn't quite make sense of what I was playing. My fingers were all over the place. This was pure evil. Not only was I fully aware that I was doing something fully against all the rules of blues decency, but the fingering, it was inhuman. But eventually things got a little bit easier, and once I got to a point where I could switch from scale to scale, things even got enjoyable. I never thought it would hit me like that, but I got a taste of what it meant to break the rules, and I liked it. Now at this point I had everything I needed to get Richard arrested, but there was still something that was puzzling to me. So if you look closely at the security footage, you see that Richard doesn't seem to be overthinking this. This change of scale as the chords happen seemed to be very natural and even musical. Here's the thing, at this point, I was too far into this investigation. I had to find out, so I called him up and promised that if he answered all my questions, I would give him full immunity. Richard agreed to meet me in a private location, and he answered all my questions and more. He told me why he did what he did that night, and I can understand why he did it. See, I came to realize in that conversation that I had been wrong all my life. I shouldn't be doing this, but I already broke so many rules in this video. I documented everything Richard told me during that meeting. I don't know how long they're gonna keep it up, but you can watch it for free right here.